Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. Introduction. Imagine for a moment that you are not you. Imagine you are living 2 million years ago, walking across the vast plains of East Africa. You are not the master of your world, far from it. You are an animal of no significance. You live in constant fear of predators. You rarely hunt large game. Your days are spent gathering plants, scooping up insects, and gnawing on the marrow from bones left behind by stronger carnivores. You are human, yes, but you are not alone. The world is home to at least 6 different human species, brothers and sisters, cousins, all belonging to the same genus, Homo. There are the burly, cold-adapted Neanderthals in Europe, and the long-enduring Homo erectus in Asia. You are Homo sapiens, and there is nothing special about you. Your brain is large, but so is a Neanderthal's. You use tools, but so does everyone else. For nearly 2 million years, this is the story of humanity, a marginal creature with no more impact on the environment than a gorilla, a firefly, or a jellyfish. Then, about 70,000 years ago, something changed. Something happened that transformed this insignificant ape into the master of the planet. What was it? What was the secret that allowed us, Homo sapiens, to conquer the globe, to walk on the moon, and to now stand on the verge of becoming gods? That is the mystery at the heart of one of the most important books ever written, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. This isn't just a history book, it's the story of us. Since its publication, it has sold tens of millions of copies and has been translated into over 65 languages, becoming a global phenomenon read by presidents, billionaires, and everyday people trying to make sense of our world. Harari, a brilliant historian from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, doesn't just tell us what happened. He unravels the very fabric of our reality, pulling at the threads of the myths, the ideas, and the fictions that hold our entire civilization together. And in this journey today, I want to share with you the profound secrets this book holds. By the time we're done, you won't just have a summary of human history. You will have a new lens through which to see the world. You'll understand the invisible forces that shape your thoughts, your desires, and your future. You'll understand how stories built our world, why agriculture was the biggest fraud in history, and what the future may hold for the animal that is about to become a god. This is the story of how we got here. Book Summary. Our journey begins where all human stories do, with a question of survival. For millions of years, our ancestors lived in the middle of the food chain. We hunted small creatures and gathered what we could, all while being hunted by larger predators. We were not the kings of the savannah. We were its anxious inhabitants. The world was shared by a family of human species. Imagine walking through a European forest 30,000 years ago and meeting a different kind of human, a Neanderthal. Stronger than you, with a larger brain, perfectly adapted to the cold. They were not a primitive, brutish caveman from the cartoons. They were intelligent, resourceful, and for a very long time, they were the masters of their domain. So what happened? Why are we the only ones left? The answer lies in the first great revolution of our history, the cognitive revolution. It began around 70,000 years ago. It wasn't because our brains suddenly got bigger or because we invented a sharper spear. The change, Harari explains, was in the very wiring of our brains. An accidental genetic mutation allowed us to think in unprecedented ways and, most importantly, to communicate with a new kind of language. Now, every animal has a language. A monkey can shout, "Careful, a lion!" But a human could say, "This morning, by the river, I saw a lion stalking a herd of bison." This ability to share detailed information about the world was a game changer. It allowed us to plan complex actions like driving away that lion and hunting the bison. Another theory suggests our language evolved for a more personal reason: gossip. Yes, gossip. For our ancestors, living in small bands, social cooperation was the key to survival. It was more important to know who in your band hated who was sleeping with whom, and who was a cheat, than to know where the lions were. Gossip helped build trust and cohesion in groups of up to about 150 individuals, the natural size limit for a community bonded by personal acquaintance. But neither of these abilities was our true secret weapon. The truly unique feature of sapiens language was, and is, the ability to talk about things that do not exist at all. Think about it. You could never convince a monkey to give you a banana by promising him limitless bananas in monkey heaven. But humans? We do it all the time. This is the power of fiction. Legends, myths, gods, and religions appeared for the first time with the cognitive revolution. But it wasn't just about spirits and deities. It was about creating what Harari calls imagined realities, or social constructs. What is a country? It's not the land or the people. It's a story we all agree to believe in. What is money? It's not the paper or the metal. It's a story about value that we all collectively accept. What about laws, human rights, or justice? None of these things exist in the objective world. You can't find them in a test tube or see them through a microscope. They are stories, incredibly powerful stories that allow millions and now billions of strangers to cooperate in flexible ways. This was our superpower. A Neanderthal could cooperate with the handful of other Neanderthals they knew intimately. But a sapiens could cooperate with thousands of strangers because they all believed in the same tribal spirit, the same king, or the same god. This is what allowed us to form larger, more stable, and more sophisticated groups. And in a conflict of hundreds against hundreds, the sapiens, with their superior teamwork, always had the upper hand. The Neanderthals, for all their strength and brain power, didn't stand a chance. This is why, Harari suggests, wherever sapiens went, the native human population soon vanished. Was it a campaign of ethnic cleansing? Or did we simply outcompete them for resources? We don't know for sure, but the result is the same. We became the last human species on Earth. Our lack of brothers and sisters makes it easier to imagine that we are the pinnacle of creation, that a vast chasm separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. But if the Neanderthals had survived, would we still think of ourselves as so special? Perhaps, Harari speculates, this is exactly why our ancestors wiped them out. They were too familiar to ignore, but too different to tolerate. With our newfound cooperative abilities, we spread out from Africa and conquered the globe. But this conquest came at a terrible price. When the first sapiens set foot in Australia 45,000 years ago, it was a land of giants, 2-meter-tall kangaroos, marsupial lions, and wombats the size of rhinos. Within a few thousand years, virtually all of them were gone. The same story repeated in America. When sapiens arrived about 16,000 years ago, the continent was home to mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats. They, too, vanished. This was the first wave extinction, driven by our species. Long before the invention of the wheel, writing, or iron tools, we, the hunter-gatherers, had already become the deadliest species in the annals of planet Earth. So, we had conquered the world. We were the undisputed masters. But were we happier for it? This brings us to the second great turning point in our history, a revolution that Harari calls history's biggest fraud, the agricultural revolution. For nearly the entire history of our species, we lived as hunter-gatherers. Our bodies and minds were shaped by that life. Then, about 12,000 years ago, we began to do something very strange. We started to devote almost all our time and effort to manipulating the lives of a few plant and animal species. We sowed seeds, watered plants, weeded fields, and herded sheep. The traditional story tells us this was a great leap forward for humanity. We were so smart that we deciphered nature's secrets, settled down, and abandoned the harsh life of foraging for the pleasant, satiated life of farmers. Harari argues that this tale is a fantasy. The agricultural revolution didn't make life easier for the average person. It made it harder. Farmers had to work longer hours than foragers, their diet was worse and less varied, and they were far more exposed to starvation and disease. Relying on a single crop, like wheat or rice, meant that if the rains failed or a fungus spread, entire populations could starve. Permanent settlements also became hotbeds for epidemics. So who was responsible for this catastrophe? Not kings or priests. The culprits, Harari says, were a handful of plant species: wheat, rice, and potatoes. These plants domesticated Homo sapiens rather than the other way around. Think about it from the viewpoint of wheat. 10,000 years ago, it was just a wild grass, confined to a small region in the Middle East. Today, it's one of the most successful plants in the history of the Earth, covering millions of square kilometers of the globe. How did it do it? By manipulating us. Homo sapiens had been living a pretty good life. But then we started to invest more and more effort in cultivating wheat. Wheat didn't like rocks, so we broke our backs clearing fields. It didn't like sharing its space, so we spent long days weeding under the hot sun. It was thirsty, so we hauled water from rivers. Our bodies, adapted for chasing gazelles and climbing trees, paid the price with slipped discs, arthritis, and hernias. We didn't domesticate wheat, it domesticated us. The word domesticate comes from the Latin domus, meaning house. It is the sapiens, not the wheat, who ended up living in a house. So why did we do it? Why did we make such a fateful miscalculation? Harari calls it the luxury trap. The shift to farming was a very gradual affair. At first, it seemed like a good deal. Let's work a little harder, our ancestors thought, and we'll have more food. Our children will never go to sleep hungry. And in the short term, it worked. But they didn't foresee the consequences. More food didn't mean a better life. It meant a population explosion. Giving up the nomadic lifestyle allowed women to have a child every year. The extra mouths quickly ate up the food surpluses. So we had to plant even more wheat, which meant working even harder. The trap snapped shut. It's a pattern we see even today. How many young people take demanding jobs, vowing they'll work hard to earn money and then retire early to pursue their real interests? But by the time they reach that age, they have large mortgages, children to school, and a lifestyle they can't give up. One of history's few iron laws is that luxuries tend to become necessities and to spawn new obligations. The pursuit of an easier life often results in much hardship. The agricultural revolution had another profound consequence. For the first time, it created significant food surpluses. But this extra food didn't go to the average peasant. Instead, it fed a tiny minority of elites who didn't have to work in the fields: kings, government officials, soldiers, priests, artists, and thinkers. For the first time, complex societies with deep hierarchies became possible. History, Harari notes, is something that very few people have been doing while everyone else was plowing fields and carrying water buckets. These new, large-scale societies, cities, kingdoms, and empires, needed more than just food surpluses to function. They needed a new kind of imagined order, a new story to bind millions of people together. This brings us to the third part of our journey: the unification of humankind. How do you get millions of strangers to cooperate? You can't rely on gossip anymore. The secret, once again, was fiction. People invented stories about great gods, motherlands, and, in our modern world, joint stock companies to provide the needed social links. Over the last few thousand years, three potentially universal orders emerged, whose devotees could, for the first time, imagine the entire world and the entire human race as a single unit. There was no longer a them, only a potential us. These were the three great unifiers of humankind: money, empires, and religion. First, let's talk about money. Money is perhaps the most successful story ever told. It's not a material reality, it's a psychological construct. It works because we all believe it works. The dollar bill in your pocket has no intrinsic value. You can't eat it or drink it, but you can exchange it for things you can eat and drink because you trust that other people will accept it as payment. Money is the most universal and efficient system of mutual trust ever devised. It's more open-minded than language, state laws, or religious beliefs. People who don't believe in the same God or obey the same king are more than willing to use the same money. For all his hatred of American culture and politics, Osama bin Laden was very fond of American dollars. Money succeeds where gods and kings fail, because whereas religion asks us to believe in something, money asks us to believe that other people believe in something. It is the apogee of human tolerance, bridging almost any cultural gap. The second great unifier was empire. An empire is a political order that rules over a significant number of distinct peoples and has flexible, potentially unlimited borders. For the last 2,500 years, empire has been the world's most common form of political organization. The story of empires is one of blood, oppression, and destruction, but they also left behind rich and enduring legacies. They were imperial steamrollers that gradually obliterated the unique characteristics of countless small cultures, forging them into new, larger groups. Empires didn't just conquer territory, they spread ideas, technologies, laws, and languages. The Romans justified their dominion by arguing they were bringing peace, justice, and refinement to barbarians. The Chinese believed they had a mandate of heaven to educate humanity. The British carried the white man's burden. These were, of course, justifications for conquest, but they also created hybrid civilizations that absorbed much from their subject peoples. Today, almost all of us speak, think, and dream in imperial languages. The modern Indian state, for all its love-hate relationship with the British Raj, is a child of the British Empire, built on its foundations of democracy, law, and even its love for cricket and tea. The third great unifier was religion. The crucial historical role of religion has been to give superhuman legitimacy to our fragile imagined orders. Religions assert that our laws are not the result of human whims, but are ordained by an absolute and supreme authority. This helps place fundamental laws beyond challenge, ensuring social stability. The majority of ancient religions were local and exclusive. They had their local deities and spirits and had no interest in converting the entire human race. But in the first millennium BC, something new appeared: universal and missionary religions. Creeds like Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam argued that their truth was true for everyone, everywhere. For the merchants, the world was a single market. For the conquerors, the world was a single empire. And for the prophets, the world held a single truth. These three forces, money, empire, and religion, were the engines that drove history relentlessly towards unity. For millennia, this was the state of the world. Then, 500 years ago, everything changed again. We entered the third and final great revolution, the scientific revolution. Like the cognitive revolution, the scientific revolution was not a revolution of knowledge. Harari argues it was, above all, a revolution of ignorance. It began with a single radical idea: the great discovery that humans do not know the answers to their most important questions. Before this, traditions like Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism asserted that everything important to know about the world was already known, revealed in scriptures or by ancient sages. There was no need to discover anything new. Modern science, in contrast, is based on the Latin injunction ignoramus, we do not know. It admits our collective ignorance and, from that admission, aims to obtain new knowledge through observation and experiment. No theory is sacred. This willingness to admit ignorance has made modern science more dynamic and inquisitive than any previous tradition. But science on its own is not enough. The engine of the modern era has been a powerful feedback loop between three forces: science, empire, and capitalism. The marriage of science and empire was a crucial development. Early European explorers did not just set out to conquer, they set out to discover. Almost every military expedition that left Europe had scientists on board. When Captain James Cook sailed to the Pacific, his ship carried not only soldiers, but also botanists, astronomers, and artists. They collected vast amounts of data that were crucial for both scientific knowledge and imperial control. The conquest of knowledge and the conquest of territory became inseparable. Empires financed science, providing resources and protection. In return, science gave empires practical knowledge, technological tools, and ideological justification. But the real fuel for this engine was capitalism. Capitalism is more than just an economic system, it's a new kind of religion. Its central belief is in growth. The modern economy, unlike all previous economies, is built on the idea of a growing pie. Pre-modern economies were based on a zero-sum game. The pie was a fixed size, so if I got a bigger slice, you got a smaller one. Capitalism is built on a revolutionary idea. The pie can get bigger for everyone. How? Through a new system based on trust in the future, called credit. Credit allows us to build the present at the expense of the future, on the assumption that our future resources will be far more abundant than our present ones. This trust in the future created credit. Credit brought real economic growth, and growth strengthened the trust in the future, opening the way for even more credit. This belief in progress was formalized by Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations. He proposed that the selfish urge to increase private profits is the basis for collective wealth. Greed is good. My profit becomes your profit. The first commandment of this new creed is that the profits of production must be reinvested in increasing production. This created a cycle of perpetual growth that has transformed the world. This capitalist engine, fueled by credit and steered by science, powered the European empires and the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was, at its heart, a revolution in energy conversion. For the first time, we learned to harness vast, cheap, and seemingly limitless sources of energy, like coal, oil, and atomic power. This liberated humankind from its dependence on the ecosystem. We were no longer bound by the cycles of the sun and the growth of plants. The result was an explosion in production, but this also created a new problem. Who is going to buy all this stuff? The answer was the birth of a new ethic: consumerism. Frugality, once a virtue, became a disease. The supreme commandment of the rich became invest, and the supreme commandment of the rest of us became buy. The capitalist and consumerist ethics are two sides of the same coin. It's the first religion in history whose followers actually do what they are asked to do. But all this progress has a dark side. The marriage of capitalism and empire was responsible for the horrors of the Atlantic slave trade, not out of racist hatred, but out of cold indifference and greed. The industrialization of agriculture has turned billions of animals into cogs in a giant production line, subjecting them to a regime of cruelty with no precedent in history. And it has also brought about the most momentous social revolution of all: the collapse of the family and the local community. For millions of years, humans lived in small, intimate communities. They were our welfare system, our health system, our insurance company, and our source of emotional support. Over the last 2 centuries, the state and the market have taken over these roles. They offered us a deal. Become individuals, they said. You are no longer dependent on your family or community. We, the state and the market, will take care of you. We accepted. The liberation of the individual is a wonderful thing, but it comes at a cost. We now live in an increasingly lonely world of unraveling communities and families, feeling alienated and threatened by the impersonal powers of the state and the market. To fill this emotional vacuum, the state and market have fostered imagined communities, the nation and the consumer tribe, to give us a sense of belonging. So, after all these revolutions, after 70,000 years of turmoil, after transforming ourselves from insignificant apes to the rulers of the planet, we must return to the most important question of all. Are we happier? Are we happier? Did the billions we've accumulated translate into contentment? Harari dedicates the final part of his book to this profound question, and the answers are not what you might expect. One popular view is that yes, of course we are happier. We have more wealth, better medicine, and less violence than ever before. But as we've seen, new powers and abilities don't necessarily make for a better life. The average peasant worked harder and had a worse diet than a forager. Another view, the romantic one, says we are less happy. We have been alienated from our natural state, living in a cold, mechanistic world that can't satisfy our deepest yearnings. The truth is more complicated. One of the most interesting findings from modern research is that happiness doesn't really depend on objective conditions like wealth or health. Rather, it depends on the correlation between our objective conditions and our subjective expectations. When things improve, our expectations balloon, and so even dramatic improvements can leave us dissatisfied. The mass media and the advertising industry are constantly depleting the world's reservoirs of contentment by showing us a standard of living we can never attain. But the most radical answer comes from biology. Biologists argue that our happiness is determined not by external factors, but by our internal biochemical system. Our subjective well-being is governed by a complex system of nerves, neurons, and substances like serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin. Some people are born with a cheerful biochemical system, and some with a gloomy one. Historical events, even something as massive as the French Revolution, have little impact on our biochemistry. A medieval peasant and a modern banker might live in vastly different worlds, but their brains are made of the same stuff. When each achieved a great success, one building his mud hut, the other closing a big deal, their brains secreted a similar amount of serotonin, bringing them to a similar level of happiness. From this perspective, history is of minor importance. If happiness is just about biochemistry, then the key to happiness is to manipulate our brain chemistry, and that is exactly where we are headed. This brings us to the final, mind-bending chapter of our story, the end of Homo sapiens. For 4 billion years, life on Earth evolved according to the laws of natural selection. Now, we are beginning to replace natural selection with the laws of intelligent design. But the designer is no longer some god in the clouds, it is us. This is happening in 3 ways. First, through biological engineering. We are not just using selective breeding anymore, we are using genetic engineering to rewrite the code of life. Scientists have created a fluorescent green rabbit by implanting a gene from a jellyfish. They have engineered mice with superior memory and learning abilities. They are even planning to resurrect the Neanderthals and the woolly mammoth. We are on the verge of being able to re-engineer not just our bodies, but our minds, our emotions, and our desires. Second, through cyborg engineering, the merging of organic and inorganic parts. Many of us are already bionic, with eyeglasses or pacemakers. But we are close to developing direct brain-computer interfaces. What happens to the self, to identity, to memory, when our minds become collective, linked directly to the internet and to each other? And third, the engineering of completely inorganic life, artificial intelligence. The Human Brain Project is currently trying to recreate a complete human brain inside a computer. If it succeeds, life will break out of the organic realm for the first time in 4 billion years. These are not science fiction fantasies. This is the reality we are creating. We are approaching a new singularity, a point at which all the concepts that give meaning to our world, me, you, love, hate, man, woman will become irrelevant. The future masters of the world will likely be more different from us than we are from Neanderthals. While we and the Neanderthals are at least human, our inheritors will be godlike. In 1818, Mary Shelley published Frankenstein, a story that has become a central myth of our time. It warns us that if we try to play God, we will create a monster that destroys us. We like this story because it implies that we are the best of all beings, and any attempt to improve upon us will inevitably fail. But what if Dr. Frankenstein could create something truly superior to us, something that will look at us as condescendingly as we look at Neanderthals? The next stage of history will include not just technological transformations, but fundamental transformations in human consciousness and identity. And so we, members of one of the final generations of Homo sapiens, are faced with one last terrifying question. We are on the verge of acquiring divine abilities of creation and destruction. The Gilgamesh Project to defeat death is now the flagship of science, and Dr. Frankenstein is piggybacking on its shoulders. Since it is impossible to stop the quest for immortality, it is also impossible to stop the creation of superhumans. The only thing we can do is try to influence the direction we are heading. And since we might soon be able to engineer our desires too, the real question facing us is not what do we want to become, but what do we want to want? Harari ends his monumental story not with an answer, but with a warning. For 70,000 years, Homo sapiens has transformed itself from an insignificant animal into the master of the entire planet and the terror of the ecosystem. We have advanced from canoes to galleys to spaceships, but nobody knows where we're going. We are more powerful than ever before, but we have very little idea what to do with all that power. We are self-made gods, accountable to no one. And his final question echoes through the ages, a question for all of us to consider. Is there anything more dangerous than dissatisfied and irresponsible gods who don't know what they want? Commentary. So, that is the breathtaking journey of Sapiens. It's a book that doesn't just teach you history, it reshapes your understanding of what it means to be human. When you finish it, you feel like you've been given a new pair of eyes. The world you thought you knew suddenly looks different, almost like seeing the source code behind our reality. The most powerful and enduring idea from the book for me is the concept of imagined realities. The realization that our entire world, our nations, our economic systems, our laws, our gods, is built on a foundation of stories is both deeply unsettling and incredibly empowering. It's unsettling because it reveals how fragile our civilization is. It all depends on us continuing to believe in the same fictions. But it's empowering because it means that the world as it is today is not natural or inevitable. We created it with our stories, and if we can collectively agree to tell a different story, we can change it. The injustices, the hierarchies, the suffering, none of it is written in stone or in our DNA. It's written in our shared imagination. This book is not just an intellectual exercise. It's a call for self-awareness on a species-wide level. It forces us to confront the consequences of our own success. We became the masters of the world, but at what cost to other animals and to the planet itself? We built empires and economies of unimaginable scale, but did it bring us happiness and contentment? And that leads to what I believe is the most urgent takeaway. The story isn't over. We are living in the most pivotal moment in the history of life on Earth. We are the generation that is beginning to replace natural selection with intelligent design. The decisions we make in the coming decades about genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and the very definition of life will shape the future for billions of years. So, how can we apply the wisdom of this book to our own lives? I think it starts with 3 simple but profound actions. First, question one story.
Pick one imagined reality that you take for granted. It could be the value of money, the importance of your national identity, or your definition of a successful life. You don't have to reject it, but just for a moment, see it for what it is, a story. Recognize that it's powerful not because it's objectively true, but because we all believe in it. This simple act of awareness is the first step toward true intellectual freedom.
Second, try to see the world from another perspective. Harari constantly asks us to think about history from the viewpoint of a Neanderthal, or a stalk of wheat, or a factory-farmed chicken. This is a powerful exercise in empathy. The next time you eat a meal, take a moment to consider the story of how that food got to your plate. When you hear about a political conflict, try to understand the competing stories that both sides are telling themselves. This practice broadens our understanding and cultivates compassion. And third, reflect on your own happiness. Don't just chase the next promotion, the next purchase, or the next fleeting pleasure. Ask yourself the deeper questions that this book raises. What gives your life meaning? Are your expectations helping or hurting your contentment? Are you a slave to your inner biochemistry, or can you observe your feelings without being controlled by them? This kind of self-inquiry is what the ancient philosophers meant by know thyself. In the end, Sapiens is more than a history. It's a mirror. It shows us where we came from, how we came to believe what we believe, and the immense and, frankly, terrifying power we now hold in our hands. The story of Homo sapiens is coming to an end, and a new story is beginning. We are the authors of that next chapter. The question is, what kind of story will we choose to write? That was Book Summary of Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. We've hit the highlights today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only take you so far. The real magic happens when you read the book yourself. It's in the quiet moments, when a particular story or a simple phrase hits you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, grab a copy. Because reading it isn't just learning, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and your daily life. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next journey into another life-changing book in Billionaire's Bookshelf. Let's keep growing.